Welcome to Shatter.
Help me reach 5,000 subscribers. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. I still remember the sound before the words. The light clatter of her fork against a plate, the buzz of conversation around us, the soft music no one ever really listens to inside Olive Garden. And then her voice, low but deliberate enough that even the couple at the next table paused. She said, "We just need time. Not a break. Not space. Time." As if we were some project she could put on a shelf until she felt like finishing it. I didn't answer. I didn't even look at her. Something in me just shut off, like a valve turning. She kept talking, weaving some story about stress and work and needing to feel heard. But all I heard was the shift, the one that told me she already had someone doing that for her. I sat there in my work boots, still smelling faintly of copper and PVC glue from the job I'd rushed to finish so I could make this dinner. She looked spotless, polished, in one of those new Nike tops she'd been buying lately. She said it made her feel like a newer version of herself. I didn't comment. It wasn't meant for me. When the waiter walked away, I caught the reflection of a man at another table smirking at us. I didn't know him yet, but later I'd learn he was the copywriter she'd been texting late into the night. The one she swore was just an old friend. Even then, before I had proof, something in his eyes told me he already knew more about my marriage than I did. She kept explaining, spinning it like a thoughtful decision, like she was doing something kind. She didn't realize that the moment she said those words, our timeline ended. Her voice faded, replaced by the quiet inside my own head. I didn't argue, didn't ask why, didn't plead for anything. I just watched the condensation slide down my glass and waited for her to finish talking. When we stepped outside, the air was cool, almost too clean. She expected a reaction, a question, a broken man. Instead, I said nothing. I walked her to her car, nodded once, and got into my Ford F-150. She thought my silence meant I was accepting her terms. She didn't know it yet, but I was done showing up where I wasn't wanted. And before the sun rose again, she would be the one looking for answers in an empty house. I didn't go home after that dinner. I drove for a while, letting the highway swallow the questions she thought I'd be asking. The sky was dark enough that my face in the window looked unfamiliar, almost like someone I used to be. I didn't feel anger, not yet. Just a strange clarity spreading through me, the kind that doesn't shout or shake. It settles, like dust after something heavy collapses. I pulled into an Applebee's, the only place still lit, and sat alone in a booth near the back. I didn't order much. Just something hot to keep my hands busy while my mind went quiet. That was when the first message came through from my buddy Mark. A single photo he didn't want to send but knew I needed to see. It was her old friend, the copywriter, leaning across the table toward her. Not touching, not crossing any obvious lines. But the way she was smiling, head tilted, shoulders relaxed, that softness she hadn't shown me in months, it was all there. Emotional closeness is louder than any physical act. That picture didn't expose anything scandalous. It exposed intent. And that cuts deeper. I stared at the screen, not shocked, not even hurt. More like confirmed. The whole dinner had been her way of softening the ground before she planted the lie. She wanted time to explore warmth elsewhere without having to call it betrayal. I sat in that booth, the hum of the place fading into the background, and realized something simple. She didn't pause our marriage. She walked out of it and expected me to wait at the door. On my way out, I passed a couple near the entrance. The woman was wearing a Nike jacket just like the one my wife had on earlier, bright, clean, almost symbolic of some new chapter she thought she was crafting. I didn't resent it. I just noted how fast she had rewritten herself for someone else to read. When I got back into the truck, I didn't feel the urge to confront her or demand the truth. I didn't know her my confusion. I drove toward home, not to fight, but to collect what still belonged to me. It was the last night she would ever have the privilege of wondering where I was. The house was dark when I got there, the kind of dark that feels intentional. She hadn't come home yet, and I didn't check where she was. I didn't need to. I unlocked the door and stepped inside like a guest visiting a place he used to know. The silence was heavy, but not uncomfortable. It felt like the truth had finally caught up with the walls, and they were waiting for me to catch up too. I set my phone on the counter and let it buzz with whatever she might be sending. I didn't look. Instead, I went to the bedroom and opened the drawer where she thought she kept her life neatly hidden. I wasn't searching for guilt. I was searching for patterns, and they were everywhere. Small gaps in her routine, late returns with no reason, the way she guarded her phone whenever a notification flashed, all the subtle movements of someone building intimacy somewhere else. I finally checked the messages, not to argue but to confirm the shape of the story. She had written to a friend earlier that week, saying she needed time to breathe, that she felt alive in real conversations again. I wasn't mentioned by name. I was just home. A backdrop. A place. Not a person. Then there were the messages from him, late-night threads filled with half-finished sentences, like they were speaking a language meant only for the two of them. Nothing physical, nothing explicit. But emotional ties are clearer than photos, and these were unmistakable. As I scrolled, the screen lit up a photo I didn't know existed. Her reflection in a window downtown, the copywriter blurred behind her. She wasn't posing for him. She was posing for a feeling she didn't think I'd understand. I realized then that she hadn't just drifted away. She had rehearsed a new life while I was fixing pipes and tightening valves to keep our old one afloat. I closed the drawer, grabbed the essentials I knew were mine, and packed them without hesitation. On my way out, I noticed the small Zales box she once hinted at wanting, still sitting unopened in the back of the closet. I didn't touch it. I wasn't planning futures anymore. I locked the door behind me, not out of anger, but out of finality. She wanted time. I was already using it to disappear. I didn't leave a note. I didn't leave a trace. By the time the sun started pushing a thin line of light over the roofs on our street, I was already driving away, the house shrinking in the rear view like a place I'd once rented but never felt at home in. My phone was off. Not silent, off. A full cut. I didn't want to hear her panic or confusion or the soft, rehearsed explanations she would send once she realized I wasn't where she expected me to be. She wanted time. I was finally giving it to both of us, just not in the version she imagined. I rented a small room near a job site on the industrial side of town. Concrete walls, dim hallway lights, a view of nothing but loading docks and trucks coming in at sunrise. It wasn't much, but it felt clean in a way our house hadn't in months. No expectations. No emotional negotiations. Just space. I dropped my bag on the bed and sat for a long moment, letting the quiet settle into my bones. When I finally turned my phone back on hours later, it erupted with messages. Her texts came in floods. First casual check-ins, then confusion, then the beginning hints of worry. I didn't respond. I scrolled through them the way someone reads old mail addressed to a previous tenant. Detached. Observational. The last one was a voice message from her friend, saying she'd gone looking for me and thought something bad had happened. Nothing bad had happened. Something necessary had. The only sound in the room was the small heater ticking against the cold. I opened my laptop and went to eBay, listing a few things we'd bought together. Items that once held meaning, but now were just objects taking up space. I didn't mark them as sentimental. I didn't price them high. I wanted them gone, the way you clear a basement before rebuilding the foundation. Later that night, I walked past a storefront downtown, the same Zales window where I'd once imagined our future in the reflection. Now it looked like any other display, bright lights on things meant for someone else's promises. I didn't stop. While she was still telling people we just needed time, I was already learning how to live in the quiet she thought would break me. Back at the room I was renting, the days settled into a rhythm that felt almost peaceful. Work, silence, sleep. No negotiations, no questions. And yet, even in that quiet, I could sense the shift happening miles away in the house she once assumed I'd orbit forever. People had started to notice things, and that's when the real unraveling began. Not because I exposed anything, but because absence has a way of revealing what presence never could. It started when my coworker, Dave, mentioned seeing her at Olive Garden a couple of nights in a row. He didn't know the full story. He wasn't trying to stir anything. He just said he thought it was strange she looked upset, sitting alone at the bar, scrolling her phone like she was waiting for someone. Not me. I hadn't been there in days. And according to him, the copywriter showed up one night looking anxious, not relaxed and charming the way she had described him. Dave said he kept glancing toward the door like he expected me to walk in. I didn't. I was done performing in their narrative. Word travels in small towns faster than truth can manage it. Her coworkers asked if everything was all right, noticing she was suddenly wearing the same Nike jacket every day. like she didn't have the energy to pretend anymore. Someone mentioned they'd seen me driving in the industrial district at dawn, looking focused, not broken. That detail mattered more than anything she tried to explain away, because people listen to actions, not stories. Meanwhile, I made one subtle move of my own. I forwarded an anonymous tip to the copywriter's agency. Nothing dramatic, nothing damaging in a public sense. Just a quiet note about a side deal he'd been bragging about online. A client he was moonlighting for in violation of his contract. I didn't attach proof. I attached breadcrumbs. Enough for the agency to look into it themselves. Enough for his carefully stacked image to wobble. I didn't do it out of spite. I did it because men like him build their confidence on attention they haven't earned. And when that attention shifts, even slightly, their foundation cracks. While she was still convincing herself she had control, the world around her had already started adjusting to my silence. The shift became visible long before she understood it. I didn't see it happen in person. I heard it through the quiet channels small towns always keep open. Her sister reached out to one of my coworkers, asking if he'd seen me. Not because she was worried about my safety, because my wife was starting to come apart in front of people who once admired her composure. At work, she had begun arriving late, makeup uneven, hair pulled back like she'd done it in the car. She wasn't wearing the polished outfits she used to plan days in advance. Just that same Nike jacket, zipped too high, like she was bracing against a wind only she could feel. The copywriter's agency had taken the bait. An internal review started, nothing loud, but loud enough for the walls to close in. He panicked. That was predictable. Men who feed off admiration always collapse the hardest when the lights dim. People saw him withdraw from conversations he normally dominated. He stopped showing up at the places where he used to flaunt his charm. And the distance he created wasn't for her. It was for himself. She felt that shift too, and it hit harder than anything I could have said. One afternoon, a friend of mine mentioned seeing her at the mall, standing outside Zales, staring at the display like she was trying to piece together a memory she'd dropped. She looked lost, he said, not dramatic or crying. Just lost, like someone whose map no longer matched the streets in front of her. She kept checking her phone, scrolling through old messages, opening and closing the same threads, hoping for something that wasn't coming back. At Olive Garden, where she once laughed too freely, she sat alone at the bar again. This time, people noticed. A coworker leaned toward her and asked if everything was okay. The way he told it, she hesitated too long before answering. That hesitation said more than any explanation she offered. The strange thing was, I didn't feel satisfaction hearing all this. All I felt was distance growing exactly where it needed to. She wasn't being punished. She was being seen, finally seen, for the choices she made when she thought I'd always be standing still. And in that widening space, my silence became the loudest truth in her life. She didn't crumble all at once. It was slower than that, almost quiet, the way a house settles when no one's inside to keep it warm. I heard the pieces through people who weren't trying to gossip. They were just describing what they saw. Her manager said she'd stopped leading conversations in sales meetings, the place where she used to shine. She sat with her arms crossed, eyes unfocused, answering questions a beat too late. Someone asked if she was feeling sick, and she brushed it off, but the veneer she'd always worn didn't stick the way it used to. She tried to keep her routines, at least on the surface. She showed up at Olive Garden one night, walking in like nothing had changed, expecting the world to fall back into its old rhythm. But the same bartender who'd seen her laughing there weeks earlier told a friend of mine she looked like she was pretending to remember who she'd been. She ordered a drink she used to love and barely touched it. She kept checking the door, not looking for me, looking for something familiar enough to anchor her. Nothing walked in. Her home life wasn't steadier. The house had become too big for her, every room a reminder of the silence she didn't know how to handle. She stayed up scrolling, opening and closing the same apps. Not one message from me. She checked my old listings on eBay, the ones she thought I'd posted out of spite. She didn't understand that clearing things out wasn't revenge, it was release. The copywriter had distanced himself completely by then. He told someone at his agency that he needed to lay low, and whatever closeness they'd built evaporated under the weight of his own fear. She tried reaching out to him, but he gave her short answers, excuses about work, the kind that come from someone retreating to save himself. She wasn't his priority anymore. She wasn't even his comfort. People around her started noticing she'd lost weight, that she was wearing that same Nike jacket like armor. When someone asked how we were doing, she froze long enough that the question became its own answer. I didn't move toward her. I didn't move away. I stayed exactly where I was, letting the separation deepen until it became a landscape she had to cross alone. She finally found me on a Thursday evening, long after the sun had dropped behind the warehouses near the room I was renting. I had just come back from a late job, hands still rough from tightening a rusted valve, clothes smelling faintly of metal and dust. When I stepped out of the stairwell, she was there at the end of the hallway, standing too straight, like she'd practiced the posture in a mirror. That same Nike jacket again, zipped all the way up as if she needed something to hold herself together. She didn't rush toward me. She didn't cry. She just watched me walk closer, waiting for any hint of the man she could negotiate with. When I stopped a few feet away, I could see how much she'd changed. Her eyes were hollow at the edges, her voice softer, like speaking required effort. She told me she'd been looking everywhere, that she'd gone to Olive Garden twice thinking I might show up out of habit. She said it carefully, the way people speak when they're trying to sound calm, but their chest is locked in panic. I didn't respond. Silence wasn't a tactic. It was the only honest thing I had left. She stepped closer, saying she'd made mistakes, that she'd been confused, that things with the copywriter weren't what they seemed. She said all this without meeting my eyes, like she was confessing to a wall instead of a person. She told me she missed me, that she wanted to fix what we had, that she'd been trying to get rid of anything that reminded her of the life she thought she wanted. She mentioned she'd even taken down some of her old listings on eBay because they suddenly felt wrong. I listened, but her words didn't hold weight anymore. They floated, thin and shaky. When she finally looked at me, expecting something, I guess, I simply nodded once. Not in agreement. Not in forgiveness. Just acknowledgement. I wasn't angry. I wasn't wounded. I was done being the man she expected to rise and fall on her terms. She waited for me to step toward her. Instead, I reached for my door and unlocked it. She tried to speak again, but the hallway swallowed her words. I wasn't walking away. I had already walked out the moment she asked for time. She didn't stop after that night in the hallway. If anything, my silence pulled her deeper into a place she'd never expected to face. I heard about it indirectly, through people who had no reason to protect her versions of things. Her manager mentioned she'd started leaving work early, claiming headaches, though anyone watching could see it wasn't her body that was hurting. It was the sudden collapse of the world she thought she'd always control. The copywriter had gone from distant to invisible, cutting her off completely once his agency started tightening policies. She tried reaching out to him again, but he answered with a single sentence that made its way back to me through the small-town echo. He told a colleague it had been a misunderstanding blown out of proportion. In other words, she wasn't worth the fallout. She returned to Olive Garden alone one evening, hoping routine could stabilize something inside her. A bartender told a friend of mine she sat there staring at her phone, scrolling through old threads, rereading our conversations like she was trying to understand where the break had started. That detail struck people more than anything she said out loud. It was the first time they realized she wasn't defending her choices anymore. She was drowning in them. Back at the house, she began cleaning out drawers, boxing old things, trying to rebuild some version of normal. She even found the small Zales box she once hinted at, the one I never opened. She held on to it for hours, according to her sister, before finally putting it in the closet again. She couldn't throw it away. She also checked my old postings on eBay, seeing what else I might have sold, and that's when she understood how far I'd already gone. The things she thought defined our life together were just transactions now, clean, quiet, unemotional. Her friends asked if she wanted to talk. She said she was fine, but the way they described her silence made it clear she wasn't protecting pride. She was realizing that every room felt wrong because I wasn't standing in any of them. And somewhere in that unraveling, she stopped asking where I was. She started asking when it was that she lost me. She showed up one last time on a quiet Sunday evening, the kind when the wind carries every sound farther than it should. I had just finished cleaning up after a long job and was sitting outside the building, letting the cool air settle the static inside me. I heard her footsteps before I saw her. Slow, careful, like she was afraid the ground might break under her. When she came into view, She looked smaller than I remembered, wrapped again in that same worn Nike jacket, the zipper pulled high as if she could hide inside it. She didn't ask permission to sit beside me. She just lowered herself onto the curb a few feet away, keeping a respectful distance, the kind people use when they finally understand they're no longer entitled to closeness. She told me she'd been working through everything, piece by piece, like someone sorting through a life they didn't recognize anymore. She said she'd packed away old things, even found the Zales box again, holding it until her hands shook. She said she realized she had always assumed I'd wait, no matter how long she wandered. I didn't interrupt. I didn't look at her. Silence had become the only language that felt accurate between us. She admitted that the copywriter had disappeared on her completely, that the connection she once called harmless had turned out to be nothing more than a temporary escape. She said she'd stopped going to Olive Garden, stopped checking eBay for the things I sold, stopped searching for excuses she didn't believe anymore. She didn't cry. She just let the truth sit between us, heavier than the months she'd tried to rewrite. When she finally asked if I hated her, I shook my head. Hatred meant attachment. What we had now was something colder, quieter, clearer. She asked if there was anything left to save. And for the first time in a long time, I looked directly at her. Not with anger. Not with affection. With honesty. I stood up, letting the moment stretch. She waited for a promise, or a sentence that would hurt, or something she could cling to. Instead, I gave her the only truth that still belonged to me. I didn't disappear. I just stopped showing up where I wasn't respected. What would you have done in my place? If the story hit you, leave a like. And don't forget to subscribe. It only gets stronger from here.